Hey, I'm Emma. Before the crash, life was like a masterpiece in progress. Every day brought new challenges, fresh inspirations, and as an illustrator, I lived for that rush of creativity. My designs didn't just fill spaces, they told stories. Each project was a chance to make my mark on the world. But that night changed everything. It was late, and the rain had just started falling, making the streets slick and dangerous. I was driving home from a major project launch, riding the high of success. My phone kept buzzing, texts from friends and clients congratulating me. I glanced at it for just a second, but that second was all it took. Tires screeched, the world spun, and everything went black. When I woke up in the ICU, it felt like trying to see through fog. The machines, the wires, everything felt surreal. A constant reminder that I had barely survived. Dr. Carter's voice was the first thing I recognized. "Emma, can you hear me?" he asked. It was a lifeline, and I tried to respond, but all I managed was a faint twitch. My husband, Jake, visited often, but something was off. His eyes, once filled with warmth, barely looked at me now. He'd say things like, "You're going to be fine, just rest." But his focus was always on his phone. And then there was his sister, Clara. She'd come by occasionally, but every visit left me feeling more unsettled. Her smile never reached her eyes, and her words, "It'd be a lot easier for Jake if this wasn't happening," stayed with me long after she left. One night, after visiting hours, Clara came into my room. I pretended to be asleep, but I could feel her presence hovering over me. "Jake's life would be so much simpler without this mess," she whispered coldly. I froze. What was she implying? Things escalated quickly after that. One evening, Clara stood by my bed, her fingers dangerously close to the ventilator that was keeping me alive. "You've always been so lucky, Emma. But maybe that luck's run out," she muttered. The next thing I knew, the ventilator's sound started to stutter. Panic surged through me, but before I could react, the door burst open. Dr. Carter stood there, his face a mixture of shock and fury. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Security was called, and Clara was taken away. Jake arrived shortly after, but instead of outrage, all I saw was irritation. "Clara, what the hell were you thinking?" he asked, more annoyed than concerned. His words hit me like a cold slap. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a betrayal. That night, as the doctor stabilized me, I knew something in me had shifted. Jake's indifference and Clara's actions had shattered whatever remained of our relationship. As I lay there in that sterile room, I made a decision. I deserved better. Filing for divorce wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I couldn't overlook the betrayal. Dr. Carter, now just Alex to me, became an unexpected source of comfort. Our conversations, once about medical updates, turned into something deeper. We talked about art, life, and recovery. Slowly, I began to heal, not just physically but emotionally. As the months went by, I realized my relationship with Alex had evolved. What started as professional concern turned into something more. We found common ground in our love for creativity and resilience, and soon, he wasn't just my doctor. He was my partner. 2 years after the accident, I now stand in front of a room full of people, Alex by my side. Together, we started a support group for those dealing with trauma and family betrayal. Our mission? To help others turn their pain into power, just like I had. I share my story to remind others that recovery is more than just physical healing. It's about finding strength in vulnerability. Looking back, every painful step brought me to this moment. I had survived, yes, but more importantly, I had transformed. And now, I have a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have been able to forgive someone who betrayed you during your most vulnerable moments, even if they were family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Your support helps us continue to share and build a community of strength and resilience. Sure, here's the continuation of the story. As the group session came to a close, I watched the faces of those who had gathered. Some were still grappling with their own pain, while others, like me, were learning to let go and move forward. It was humbling, really, knowing that my story had become a beacon of hope for others. After the session, Alex and I stayed behind to chat with a few of the members. A woman named Lily, who had been attending for months, lingered at the back of the room, hesitating. I recognized the look in her eyes, one of fear and uncertainty, the same look I used to carry in the early days of my recovery. I walked over to her, offering a reassuring smile. "How are you holding up?" I asked, keeping my tone soft. Lily bit her lip, her eyes darting to the door as if she were ready to bolt. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some days, it feels like I'm just existing, not living." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. I used to feel the same way. There were days I thought I'd never truly heal, that the weight of everything would always be there. But healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about learning to live with it, to find peace in the scars. Her eyes flickered with a mix of hope and doubt. But what if the people who hurt you don't care? What if they never see how much damage they've done? I sighed, remembering the countless sleepless nights when I had asked myself the same question. Forgiveness isn't about them, I said gently. It's about you. Letting go isn't for their sake. It's for yours. You deserve peace, even if they don't ask for forgiveness. Lily's eyes welled up with tears and she nodded, as if finally allowing herself to believe it. "Thank you," she whispered before quickly excusing herself. As she left, Alex approached, his eyes following her out of the room. "She reminds me of you," he said softly, sliding his arm around my waist. "She reminds me of me too," I replied, leaning into him. "But I think she's stronger than she realizes." Alex smiled, squeezing my hand. "Just like you." We packed up the room together, the quiet between us comfortable and familiar. It was a strange thought that this hospital, once a place of so much pain, was now a place of healing. The walls had witnessed my darkest moments, but they had also seen my rebirth. As we left, walking into the cool evening air, Alex turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Have you ever thought about telling your story on a larger scale?" I frowned, a bit confused. "What do you mean? Like a book or something?" "Maybe," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Or maybe speaking to larger groups. There are so many people out there, Emma, who need to hear what you have to say. You've lived through something most people couldn't imagine, and you've come out stronger. You're an inspiration." I laughed softly, feeling a bit shy at the idea. "I don't know, Alex. I'm not sure if I'm ready for something like that." He stopped walking and turned to face me, his hands on my shoulders. "You are ready. More than ready. Think about it. You could help so many more people. People who might not have a group like this to turn to. Your voice matters." His words settled into me like seeds, planting themselves deep in my mind. I had always thought my story was just for the people in this room, for those in our group. But Alex was right. There were so many more who might need to hear it. Later that night, as we sat on the couch in our cozy living room, I found myself daydreaming about the future. Maybe a book, maybe speaking engagements, maybe, just maybe, I could turn my pain into something even bigger, something that reached beyond the walls of the support group. Alex glanced over at me, his face soft in the dim light. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" he asked, a knowing smile tugging at his lips. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe I am." He reached for my hand, his thumb tracing small circles over my skin. "Whatever you decide, I'll be here, right by your side." I smiled, feeling a warm bloom in my chest. "I know you will." As we sat there in the stillness of our home, I realized that my journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The pain, the betrayal, the near-death experience, all of it had shaped me, yes, but it hadn't defined me. I was more than my past. I was more than the broken woman lying in that ICU bed. I was Emma, and I had a story to tell. And maybe, just maybe, the world was ready to listen. The decision to share my story on a larger scale lingered in my mind for days. Alex's encouragement had sparked something in me, a feeling that maybe it was time to step out of the shadows of my past and truly own my experience. But I wasn't sure where to begin. Writing a book? Speaking to crowds? It all felt overwhelming. One evening, while I was browsing through emails and catching up on messages from our support group members, a new notification popped up. It was from a journalist named Megan Reed. The subject line read, asterisk, your story could inspire millions. Asterisk, curious, I opened the email. Dear Emma, I came across your support group while researching for an article on trauma recovery, and I've been deeply moved by what you've built. Your personal journey is inspiring, and I believe your story could resonate with people all over the world. I'd love to speak with you about possibly sharing it through a feature piece in Modern Life magazine. Please let me know if you're interested. Warm regards, Megan Reed, Senior Editor. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heart pounding. Modern Life was one of the most well-known lifestyle magazines. A feature like that could reach thousands, maybe even millions of people. But was I ready for that level of exposure? Sharing my story with our support group was one thing, but telling the world, it felt daunting. I showed Alex the email that night, and his face lit up with excitement. Emma, this is huge. You have to do it. I don't know, I murmured, biting my lip. What if it's too much? What if people don't get it? Or worse, what if they judge me? Alex shook his head, taking my hands in his. People are always going to have opinions, but that doesn't change the fact that your story has power. And if even one person is helped by reading it, wouldn't it be worth it? His words sank in, and I found myself nodding slowly. Okay, I said quietly. I'll respond to her. The next day, I wrote back to Megan, and within hours, we had scheduled a phone call. The interview was set for later that week. When the day arrived, I sat at my kitchen table, nervously clutching my phone. Megan's voice was warm and reassuring when she called, and she immediately put me at ease. Emma, thank you so much for speaking with me. I've read a bit about your support group, and it's amazing what you've accomplished. But I want to hear more about you. How did it all begin? I took a deep breath, then began recounting the story of the accident, my recovery, the betrayal by Jake and Clara, and the unexpected bond one had formed with Alex. As I spoke, the words flowed more easily than I expected. It was cathartic, reliving the moments that had once caused so much pain, but now seemed like distant memories. By the end of the call, Megan was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice full of admiration. Emma, your strength is remarkable. I can't wait to share your story with our readers. I think this could really help people. When the feature was published 2 weeks later, the response was overwhelming. Emails and messages flooded in from people who had been through similar experiences, survivors of trauma, betrayal, and heartbreak, all sharing their own stories of resilience. Many of them thanked me for being brave enough to speak out, telling me how much it meant to them. It was then that I realized Alex had been right all along. This was bigger than me. My story had the power to help others heal, to show them that there was life after trauma, that they weren't alone. As the weeks went by, opportunities started to roll in, invitations to speak at events, interviews on podcasts, even an offer to write a book. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. But with Alex by my side, I felt ready to take on this new chapter. One morning over coffee, I turned to Alex with a grin. You know, I never imagined my life would take this turn. He smiled back at me, his eyes soft with affection. I always knew you had it in you. You've been through hell, but you didn't just survive, you thrived. And now you're helping others do the same. I looked out the window at the morning light filtering through the trees. It's strange, I mused. If you'd told me 2 years ago that I'd be here doing this, I wouldn't have believed you. Alex leaned in, brushing a stray hair from my face. That's the beauty of life. Sometimes, the darkest moments lead to the brightest futures. The months that followed were a whirlwind. I spoke at several conferences, each time sharing my story with more confidence. I wrote a memoir, pouring my heart into each page, detailing not just the accident and the aftermath, but the journey of self-discovery that followed. It was both terrifying and liberating to see my life laid out in print. Then one evening, while Alex and I were relaxing after a particularly busy day, I received a call from Megan. This time, her voice was filled with excitement. "Emma, you won't believe this. We just found out that your memoir is being considered for a movie adaptation." I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. "A movie?" "Yes. A major production company is interested. They think your story could translate beautifully to the screen. I'll send you the details, but I had to call and let you know first." I hung up the phone in shock, turning to Alex. "They want to turn my story into a movie?" I whispered, still trying to process the news. Alex's eyes widened, and then he broke into a huge grin. "That's incredible. You deserve this, Emma. Your story deserves to be told in every way possible." As the idea began to sink in, I realized just how far I had come. From that hospital bed, feeling broken and lost, to now, standing on the cusp of something extraordinary. My pain had transformed into something powerful, and the future felt full of possibilities. As I held Alex's hand, I knew that no matter what came next, I was ready to share my story with the world, and ready to embrace whatever challenges and joys lay ahead. Because I had learned that true strength didn't come from avoiding pain. It came from facing it and rising above it. And that's exactly what I intended to do.